a dogma lesson, just not bothering to plan? That's a question for TEFLologists. When I read this book, is it better to skim or scan? That's a question for TEFLologists. Can you be a good teacher if you have a CELTA? Or should you invest in an MA or a Delta? From politics to methodology, we'll discuss them all on TEFLology.
Welcome to another interview episode of TEFLology. This week features an interview with Professor Phil Benson. Phil Benson is a professor of applied linguistics at Macquarie University. His background is in TESOL. He has taught English in Japan, Malaysia, the Seychelles, Kuwait, and Algeria. His main research interest is in learner autonomy and in informal language learning beyond the classroom. He's also interested in narrative inquiry as an approach to research on language learning. Matt and Rob spoke to him recently about some of his areas of interest. Please enjoy.
So, Professor Benson, thank you very much for agreeing to be interviewed by us today. Before we just maybe kick things off by, if you could just give us a brief summary of what learner autonomy is, if that's possible in terms.
It's not really possible, but I'll do my best. Sure. In a nutshell, it's about learners having more control over their learning, whether inside the classroom or outside the classroom.
Right.
And it's got a lot of different applications. It's an idea, and it's an idea that's got a lot of different applications. Mm-hmm. For example, in self-access learning, but also in classroom teaching, in computer-assisted language learning, and so on. But I mean, in all those contexts, it's about students having more say, having more control. And from the teacher's point of view, giving more attention to what the students want to do and are interested in doing.
So, what do you think are the benefits of handing more control of over their learning to students?
Well, the obvious one is that they'll be learning what they want to learn rather than what we think they should learn. And I think there's a lot more interest in learner autonomy in language learning than there is in other fields of education, other subject areas in education. And I guess the reason for that is that, like, learning a language is a very open-ended thing. Because if you're learning English, what are you actually learning? Everybody could be learning something quite different.
Right.
In fact, there's a lot of choices that have to be made. So it seems to be, just from the point of view of the personal value of learning, that students make those choices as much as possible, rather than the teachers. Other benefits, of course, is just more the benefits you get from being more involved in something, more active in something that you're learning. Sort of motivational benefits,
right?
And just in general, learning should be better.
Okay.
We've just come out with a talk about reflective practice in teaching. Your interest in learner autonomy, did that come out of your own reflection on your classes?
No, it came out of my own reflection on my learning, language learning.
Right. Okay, that's interesting.
No. Well, several languages. That I mean, I studied French and German at school and then kind of forgot about it. But I became, the kind of contract TEFL teacher for a period of time. So I was always trying to learn the language of wherever I was. So now I know a little bit of about half a dozen languages. I don't know any of them that well, but they were all self-taught. So really, initially my interest was in sort of self-study of languages, and I was pretty anti-classroom actually. I personally don't think going to a language class is the best way for me to learn a language, but obviously there are a lot of people who think it's the best way for them, which I wouldn't argue against that. But my interest came from sort of self-instruction, and then initially self-access centres, and then later I sort of developed more interest in ideas for autonomy in the classroom.
Right.
And self-access is becoming a growing thing, I guess, especially in Japan. There seems to be a movement in self-access. Is that a genuine?
Yeah, I think it's surprising, actually. It's persistent, really, is what I'd say. It was a big thing in the late 80s and early 90s, which is when I got involved in that. And yeah, people used to say it would die out. It was just something that would last for a few years and then disappear. A bit like language labs. Because at that time, actually, self-access centres sort of replaced language labs. When language labs have pretty much died out.
Right.
Although there are some self-access centres that look like language labs to me.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, it's kept going, and it's sort of, it's kind of moved around the world, and I think Japan is one country where there's a lot of really interesting work going on. Well, I could mention is it KUIS, Kanda University of International Studies, but there are other universities as well that are doing good work. And I don't know why, but also Mexico is another. When we have conferences on autonomy, there's always a few people from Mexico who are building a self-access centre or developing that.
Right.
Yeah. So they're actually still, and also there's still quite an active sort of community, holding conferences and meetings in different parts of the world.
Yeah. So would you say that a focus on autonomous learning changes the role of the teacher away from being a giver of knowledge, more towards being a facilitator of learning?
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Right.
I mean, there are situations where it's, I don't know. I mean, I would think in a classroom, in the context of a whole course of study, then I wouldn't say that autonomy necessarily means the teacher giving all the control, decision making to the students, but it involves a balance of different things. I mean, there will be times when actually the students really expect you to give them some knowledge. I think to sort of hold it back and say, oh no, there's a library over there, or there's a dictionary over there, go find it out yourself. Is probably not reasonable, because they're already being autonomous in the sense of asking you what they want to know. So I think to me it's more about the facilitation comes from the students having more decision about what they're learning, and then you need to help them, right? You need to be responsive to what they learn.
Right.
So to me it's the content of what they're learning that's important. And if the teacher is deciding that, or if it's just coming from a textbook, then how do you know whether it's corresponding to what the students want to learn or even need to learn?
Okay. And so how can, in your opinion, what are the best ways for teachers to go about being facilitators of learning, encouraging autonomy?
There's no rule book for that. To me, it's a kind of style of teaching and a style of planning lessons. It's just, I mean, whether teachers formally plan the lesson or informally plan the lesson, I mean, all the time you tend to be thinking, well, what am I going to do? What will I do? What do I need to tell them? What do I need to teach them? And so on.
Yeah.
So if you can, flip around those questions, and every time you ask that question, include the question, well, could the students do some of that?
Yeah.
I mean, a simple example in classroom teaching is where you've got some sort of reading passage and some sort of comprehension questions. Well, could the students actually choose the reading passages themselves? Could they write the questions as well as answer the questions? Could they design reading passages and questions for each other? That kind of thing. Then it becomes a much more interesting activity, I think, for the students.
Right.
Possibly they'll learn more. Yeah. But it'll free you up as a teacher to sort of walk around and just help them out. Right. If you get it also involves, I think, getting students talking. And once you've got students talking and participating in the design of the classes, then things kind of work on their own.
Okay.
You know, you have to help, you have to facilitate.
Right.
So the teacher has to be involved in.
Yeah. But a couple of people have written, I think, really quite a long time ago. A guy called David Crabb from Wellington. He wrote this article and he was talking about the minute-by-minute practice.
Right.
What he was pointing out was that with a lot of teachers, they're sort of telling students that you should do this in order to be more autonomous. But then in their own practice, they're always kind of closing down options and so on. He had a nice example of a student. He just got slightly off track on the task, and every time anybody went slightly off task, he said, "Oh no, you're not supposed to be doing that. You're supposed to be doing this." So it was what they were actually doing was really okay. There was no problem with it. They were probably learning, you know. But a lot of teachers do that. You know, we try to keep all the students on the same track.
One, maybe not a criticism, but something that's been levelled at learner autonomy is I often hear teachers saying, well, my learners don't learn in this way, in this context, for example, in the Asian context. And I think in your plenary 3 years ago, you kind of said learner autonomy isn't just a Western methodology that's come from the West. It was already present in other areas a long time ago.
Well, the first thing is that it's quite a radical. It's not a methodology. It's quite a radical approach, even in a Western context. And I guess even more so nowadays. I mean, you guys are from the UK, so I mean, the whole trend in the UK in school education, at least, has been
especially with
sort of standardization. Well, I'm thinking schools, but standardization. Everybody sort of stick to the program and so on. So it's been really an anti-autonomy trend there. So it's still quite radical in the West. And I think that's the case in Asian contexts as well. It's quite a radical idea in most education systems, but it's not. I mean, I think because an idea is radical and it runs counter to the prevailing educational practice, that doesn't necessarily make it culturally inappropriate, because you know, it's that's a normal education system where there are different ideas circulating. But also, I mean, it's true that there are kind of roots of ideas of autonomy in Chinese culture. People in China now are actually debating whether whether Confucian education ideas are authoritarian and follow the master kind of idea, or whether actually there was much more of a sense of individual self-development involved in that.
And so perhaps following on from that question, you were talking about different contexts and in the UK, very standardised schooling. So what can teachers do if they are in a context where there are certain syllabus requirements? How can they encourage autonomy in that kind of context?
Well, I think there are different approaches to that. They don't all work as well as others. But I guess the most radical approach to that would be to sort of share the syllabus requirements with the students. So to treat it as a sort of collective effort. Say, look, this is what we have to do. How are we going to do it? What do you think is the best way to achieve these particular goals? If that's a difficult thing to do, I think there are other quite simple things that you can do that just influence the sort of style of teaching that you participate in, that involves the students more. The example I gave before, if reading comprehension is part of the program, if that's something you have to do regularly, I mean, a lot of contexts people have abandoned that, but I think in Asian schools it's quite a typical thing that has to be done.
Right.
Then you can try those kinds of methods where the students are choosing the text that they read, students are designing questions, and so on.
Okay.
So I think that and in any particular task that has to be done in schooling, then I think you can flip it around, find ways of flipping it around, so students just providing more of the input.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's good. Nice answer.
Just maybe a question about your talk yesterday. So, maybe can you just briefly describe the relationship between autonomy and neuroscience?
Well,
if that's possible.
Okay, well, at the risk of contradicting everything I've just said, that's the talk I gave yesterday was based on some reading I've been doing on neuroscience and particularly neuroeconomics, which is application of neuroscience to economics, and particularly to what they call sort of rational choice theories of economic behavior, which that people basically make sort of sensible decisions about things they buy or ways that they invest and so on. I was discussing that because some of those ideas are quite challenging, actually, to the idea that giving people more control is even feasible. The main points I was looking at there were the sort of arguments that really a lot of I suppose to put it in a nutshell, that a lot of language learning behavior and a lot of the processes that people go through in learning a language cannot really be controlled, because they're automatic, they're implicit. Another aspect of that was how important affect or emotion is in decision making and learning. And again, affect and emotion are less controllable than cognitive processes. So this is all very, very tentative, and it's just I was just when I give these kinds of papers that are not plenary papers, they're often just exploring ideas that I've been interested in recently, and they may not even go anywhere. But in this case, I was interested really in how much emphasis we should be giving on ideas about students having control over classroom processes, and how much emphasis we should really be putting on autonomy as kind of a more responsive, more an idea of being responsive to situations in which you might be able to learn the language, creating those situations, taking advantage of those situations outside the classroom. So I'm actually going back to the idea that I feel that what happens outside the classroom is a lot more important than what happens inside classrooms.
Yeah.
And so, for example, self-access suites are a way to facilitate the going on outside the classroom.
They are. I mean, if I want to annoy people who work in self-access, I would actually say that the world is a better self-access centre at the moment. The internet is a pretty good self-access centre. What is actually the role of having something institutionalized in this particular way? But having said that, I know that a lot of people who work in self-access think in the same way, and they're kind of rethinking the kinds of things that you do in self-access, so to make the best use of that resource rather than to sort of institutionalize things that students could be doing naturally outside.
Do you think that autonomy as an approach, or encouraging autonomy, do you think that that's suitable for all learners? Because I know in my own language learning experience, I'm really bad at doing things by myself. I kind of need someone standing over me with, like a whip, trying to get me to do things. So do you think that...
Well, that's why you need autonomy.
Okay.
Yeah, that could be. I think it's, seriously, I think it's suitable as an approach for learners, but in different ways, with some sensitivity. Because actually at the root of it, it means being, as a teacher, being sensitive to differences among students.
Right.
And allowing them, or helping them to develop in the ways that suit them as individuals. So, so there might be a group of students in your class who do benefit more from instruction or from more pressure or more pushing or so on.
Right.
But maybe others who don't
Right.
don't need that, who will develop better in another way. Yeah.
So it depends on the student, I guess. And
Yeah,
it depends on
yeah.
how they learn.
Yeah.
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 Some of the conflict we have in our context is whether to give teacher-fronted feedback or defer to the students for their own feedback. And has there been any kind of studies done that kind of shows, well, this is a more effective method than that method, for example? In terms of feedback or
Teacher-fronted versus student-centered feedback.
noticing error?
In the SIG session on neuroscience that I went to this morning, they were mentioning research which does actually show that peer feedback, feedback from your friends, has more impact. It's in the sense that you remember it more. You're more likely to remember it
Right.
than feedback from a stranger or somebody who's in sort of a more distant position.
Yeah.
So that I actually was not aware of that. So that's some sort of evidence. But of course, I think one of the problems with peer feedback is that the students themselves don't respect the feedback that they're getting. They can't trust the other students. So I think it's something that you kind of have to be sensitive about, and you know what kind of feedback does the student want from another student. And I've seen it in action, and often it doesn't work well. I don't think it's a thing that is easy to make work.
Right.
But I guess.
So you need some direction from the teacher
And practice.
initially.
I mean, a lot of these things they need practice. You know, they don't work too well the first few times you do them, but with practice, they work better.
Right.
So in a sense, anything new you introduce, because the more conventional styles of teaching and learning, students have been doing it for years. So in a sense, they work because they're familiar, because they're used to them. So you introduce something new. And unless you give that time to sort of bed in, develop, then it's not going to work as well. No.
Yeah, I guess that would depend on the disposition of the students towards the teacher as well. If they've got more of a friendly relationship, then they're more likely to take on board their feedback than if they're, the authoritarian figure at the front of the class.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
But I tend to find when the students study abroad, they come back having learnt more from their friends in their dormitory. And, slang or not bad habits, but maybe bad words. They remember the bad words from other students also studying. So I guess that goes with what you're saying, that they forget everything that took place in the class. Not everything necessarily, but they learn more from their peers perhaps.
I'm a big fan. I'm not so sure about peer feedback. I'm a big fan of peer teaching. Peer teaching and learning, which I think is something that can work very effectively with only a certain amount of training, with not a great deal of training.
Right. So maybe one final
Just
question?
one final question, perhaps,
So where do you see research in autonomy going in the near future? What do you think are the directions that it's going to take?
Neuroscience? I'm not sure about that. I mean, I know at the recent Congress in Iowa, two of the big themes there's always a lot of presentations on autonomy in Iowa, and two of the big themes there were affect, emotion, the role of emotion in autonomy and learning, and the other one was about space.
Right.
So, I mean, I know there'll be publications coming out in the next couple of years on both of those areas. Space being a whole way of conceptualizing the sort of environmental situations in which students learn and what best promotes autonomous learning.
Right.
What kind of spaces? Rather, I mean, we've always looked at self-access as a thing, classrooms as a thing, but actually these are different kinds of spaces.
Right.
And there are many different kinds of spaces where people are learning. So looking at learning from that perspective of space and environment and so on, I think both of those are going to be important.
Okay. Right, well, thank you very much
Thank you.
for agreeing to be
Thank you.
interviewed and for
Pleasure.
your answers. It's been a very nice conversation.
Good.
Thanks.
We hope you enjoyed the interview with Phil Benson. We'll be back next time with a regular episode of TEFLology. As usual, thank you very much for listening. Please feel free to contact us. We are on Twitter @TEFLology, and our email address is teflology@gmail.com. Thanks a lot.